A reading from the Acts of the Apostles. Then Peter stood up with the 11, raised his voice, and proclaimed, "You who are Jews, indeed all of you staying in Jerusalem, let this be known to you and listen to my words. You who are Israelites, hear these words. Jesus the Nazarene was a man commended to you by God with mighty deeds, wonders, and signs, which God worked through him in your midst, as you yourselves know. This man, delivered up by the set plan and foreknowledge of God, you killed, using lawless men to crucify him. But God raised him up, releasing him from the throes of death, because it was impossible for him to be held by it. For David says of him, 'I saw the Lord ever before me. With him at my right hand, I shall not be disturbed. Therefore, my heart has been glad and my tongue has exulted. My flesh too will dwell in hope, because you will not abandon my soul to the netherworld, nor will you suffer your Holy One to see corruption. You have made known to me the paths of life. You will fill me with joy in your presence.' My brothers, one can confidently say to you about the patriarch David that he died and was buried, and his tomb is in our midst to this day. But since he was a prophet and knew that God had sworn an oath to him that he would set one of his descendants upon his throne, he foresaw and spoke the resurrection of the Christ, that neither he was abandoned to the netherworld, nor did his flesh see corruption. God raised this Jesus. Of this we are all witnesses. Exalted at the right hand of God, he received the promise of the Holy Spirit from the Father and poured him forth, as you see and hear." The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
A reading from the first letter of St. Peter. Beloved, if you invoke as Father him who judges impartially according to each one's works, conduct yourselves with reverence during the time of your sojourning, realizing that you were ransomed from your futile conduct handed on by your ancestors, not with perishable things like silver or gold, but with the precious blood of Christ, as of a spotless, unblemished lamb. He was known before the foundation of the world, but revealed in the final time for you, who through him believe in God, who raised him from the dead and gave him glory, so that your faith and hope are in God. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke.
Glory to you, O Lord.
That very day, the first day of the week, two of Jesus' disciples were going to a village 7 miles from Jerusalem called Emmaus, and they were conversing about all the things that had occurred. It happened that while they were conversing and debating, Jesus himself drew near and walked with them. But their eyes were prevented from recognizing him. He asked them, "What are you discussing as you walk along?" They stopped, looking downcast. One of them, named Cleopas, said to him in reply, "Are you the only visitor to Jerusalem who does not know of the things that have taken place here in these days?" And he replied to them, "What sort of things?" They said to him, "The things that happened to Jesus the Nazarene, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word, before God and before the people. How our chief priests and rulers both handed him over to a sentence of death and crucified him. But we were hoping that he would be the one to redeem Israel. And besides all this, it is now the third day since this took place. Some women from our group, however, have astounded us. They were at the tomb early in the morning, and they did not find his body. They came back and reported that they had indeed seen a vision of angels who announced that he was alive. Then some of those with us went to the tomb, and they found things just as the women had described, but him they did not see." And he said to them, "How foolish you are! How slow of heart to believe all that the prophets spoke! Was it not necessary that the Christ should suffer these things and enter into his glory?" Then, beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them what referred to him in all the scriptures. As they approached the village to which they were going, he gave the impression that he was going on farther. But they urged him, "Stay with us, for it is nearly evening and the day is almost over." So he went in to stay with them. And it happened that while he was with them at table, he took bread and said the blessing. He broke it and gave it to them. With that, their eyes were opened and they recognized him, but he vanished from their sight. Then they said to each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he spoke to us on the way and he opened the scriptures to us?" So they set out at once and returned to Jerusalem, where they found gathered together the 11 and those with them who were saying, "The Lord has truly been raised and has appeared to Simon." Then the two recounted what had taken place on the way and how he was made known to them in the breaking of the bread. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
So we honor today primarily those CCD teachers who are with us today, but we can't forget our instructors of long ago. And I would just like to remind everybody just how efficacious, love that big word, it's an SAT word, just how efficacious their efforts were as I ask people of a certain age to give me the whole answer to both of these questions. It's a tribute to your old catechism teachers. First question, you got to answer in a complete sentence to get full credit. Who made you? God is a one-word answer. That is not a complete sentence. Try it again. Who made you? God made me. Why did God make you? Okay, we got a pocket of wisdom over here, right over here, okay? To know him, to love him, to serve him in this life, and to be happy with God forever in the next, okay? Now, who really remembered that answer? Who really remembered that answer? Okay, now let's go back. Who learned it? Let's go back and see who's hung on to it for the longest time. Don't be afraid to show your age. It's a sign of wisdom. Who learned that in the 1960s? Who learned it before the 1960s? Who learned it before the 1950s? Let's go back. How about before the 40s? We're still got some contestants here. Before the 30s. In the 30s. Okay, excellent. So we have wisdom that's been hanging around for quite some time, huh? To know God, to love God, to serve God. And that comes to us, actually, that particular articulation comes to us from the Council of Trent. In the 1540s it started, right? And if it's in the Baltimore Catechism, it's because it was in the Council of Trent. Baltimore Catechism is really just a summation. So that particular articulation has been around for, 500 years almost, huh? Anybody here at the Council of Trent?
No, okay. Okay, good. And the order is to know, to love, to serve. And that's no accident. That the more we know, the more we love him. And the more we love him, the more we serve him. And the more we serve him, the deeper the peace that prevails in our hearts, right? It's a very precise order. It wasn't as if it's an alphabetical order, JKLM, although it is an alphabetical order. To know God, to love God, to serve God, and more particularly for us as Christians, to know Jesus Christ, to love Jesus Christ, to serve Jesus Christ. That's why we exist. And the readings today remind us of the importance and the centrality of the knowing, and not just the knowing that is, like, I know the 21 counties of New Jersey. Does anybody remember that one? Carl, you can name the 21 counties in alphabetical order? North, okay, go ahead, try it. Loud. You're missing one. What is it? 21 counties, okay. And north to south, that's all I can do is alphabetical order. See if I get 21. Atlantic, Bergen, Burlington, Camden, Cape May, Cumberland, Essex, Gloucester, Hudson, Hunterdon, Middlesex, Monmouth, Morris, Mercer, Ocean, Passaic, Somerset, Sussex, Salem, Union, and Warren. 21, okay? But Carl, and we didn't practice that ahead of time. Carl knows where they are. I couldn't tell you the first thing about them. I know where Monmouth County is because that's the center of the universe, and after that, it all kind of gets vague. But there's that difference, and I couldn't tell you a whole lot. At least Carl knows where they are north to south. Half of them I couldn't find on a map if I had to, but I can tell you what's the next alphabetical neighbor. When we're called to know Christ, it's not about just being able to chirp stuff, but unless we can chirp it, it's hard to get started. But at any rate, however we categorize the knowing that we're called to experience, if we don't know him, we don't love him. If we don't love him, we can't serve him. Put more positively, the more we know him, the more we love him, the more we serve him. Today's first reading gives us a reminder that that negative version is true. If we don't know him, we can't love him. And if we can't love him, we can't serve him. And if we can't serve him, we don't find that peace. St. Peter here, early on in the Acts of the Apostles, reminds people, the people who rejected Christ, that God sent Jesus with mighty deeds and mighty works, and that the people saw them but didn't understand them and didn't regard those mighty deeds as evidence of a unique connection between Jesus and the Father. And so while they had the opportunity to know him, truly to understand him, they rejected that opportunity. And because they didn't understand him, they didn't love him. St. Peter is very clear in the speech today. Not only did they not love him, what does St. Peter say? And this is what you did to him. What did you do to him? You killed him, right? Your understanding and your knowledge was so deficient that not only did you not love him, you killed him. And in killing him, there's no way to serve him. And in doing that, there's no way for you to get to peace. So the negative example is, if you don't make progress in knowing, you can't love him. And if you can't love him, you can't serve him. And that's a big loss for you and for everybody around you. In the gospel today, we get just the opposite story. The affirmative, the positive version. The more you know, the more you love, the more you serve, the more peace. And so what was it that Jesus was telling them on the way to Emmaus? Was he giving them lessons in meteorology? Was he telling them about Roman politics? No. He opened the scriptures to them so that they could understand who he was. Right? And so his admonition, his correction to those disciples is, you're really not with the program. You don't understand, and you think you are, and that's good, and you've got a great start, but there's so much more for you to understand. And so Jesus walked along, and what he did is he explained to those disciples who he was and how he worked. As some of the people would say, he explained to them how he rolls. Because they thought they had it all figured out, but they really didn't. They still thought of him as the great political liberator. But then as he explained to them who he was and they understood who he was, what did they say? What happened to them? What happened to that particular part of their physical being? As he explained to them who he was, what happened to them? Yeah, their hearts were burning within them. The more they knew about him, the more they loved him. And the more they loved him, as soon as they got in touch with that deeper love, did they sit there and just hang on to it themselves? No, what did they do? They turned around and went racing back to tell the others. That's a form of service. It's right there. The more we know, the more we love, the more we serve. Look at the road to Emmaus. And look at Peter's tough speech to the people who heard him. If you don't know him, you're not going to love him. You're not going to love him. You're not going to serve him. And you're not going to experience peace. On the other hand, the more you know, the more you love. The more you love, the more you serve. The more you serve, the deeper the peace. Where do we go with that? In this Easter season, it's recognizing that God has planted deep in each one of us certain desires, and it's our responsibility to be good stewards of those desires. One of those desires that we couldn't put out if we wanted to is that desire to know Christ more, to understand who he is, and not just to be able to prattle off facts like my version of the counties of New Jersey, but to understand this is a part of a deepening relationship. And the question today is then, how do we tend to that desire in ourselves and other people? Are we taking care of it? Because deep within each one of us, and we try to satisfy it in different ways, and sometimes we get it right, and sometimes not so right, but deep within each one of us is that God-given desire to know him more, that we may love him more, that we may serve him more. And how are you doing with that? My guess is that most people are doing pretty well. And just judging by that small piece of your life that is connected to this parish, it's been a great year. And I'm not talking so much about the younger people, I'm talking about the grown-ups, the 18 and older. Walking with Purpose had a terrific year. The spiritual exercises people have had a terrific year. The men's prayer group that's just getting going, it's a great year. The tending the garden thing, the morning rosary group, the different prayer groups, all of those things that enable us to know him more, that we may love him more, that we may serve him more. The people, the Christmas present, resisting happiness. A lot of people report that was a great way to just get that new insight into who Jesus is and how he calls us. Chuck Swindoll on the radio, a lot of you reported really enjoying that, and some of the radio programs that come to us from up at Zarephath, right up the street. So many ways in which the Lord is calling us to know him more, and so many people take such great advantage of that. And so I'd ask you to notice, where are you getting it right these days, 18 and older crowd, in terms of, this is really helping. This is one of those things that leads me, because there's never a finish line. There is never a finish line. To know him more, to get that additional glimpse, that additional movement of the heart, that additional question about who he is and who he was and who he will be. So what's working for you in terms of tending that call to deeper knowledge of Christ? And the second thing is, what's working for you is the first, and the second is, how are you helping other people to do that? Because as we say in teacher land, you don't really know it until you teach it, right? The more that you do it for other people, the further you get into it. Parents, you do that all the time. Every time you drive your child to CCD, you're helping someone to come to know Jesus more. Every time you explain to someone a little bit more about how the Bible works or who Jesus is, you're enabling someone to move along that road to Emmaus. CCD teachers, in a particular and a marvelous way today, we recognize the fact that you are calling those people that you teach along the Emmaus road, that they may know him more, that their hearts may burn a little bit more energetically, that they may come to serve him more. A lot of people doing a lot of great things. I just ask you to notice it, to name it, and to thank God for it. A lot of people moving a lot of others along the Emmaus road, that they may know him more, that they may love him more, that they may serve him more. And so just notice those two places where you're getting it right and want to stay with it. What's working for you to know him more, to understand him, and deeply in relationship? And thank God for it. And in what ways are you enabling others to do it? And CCD teachers, I'd ask you to notice that you're doing exactly what Peter did in the first reading. And you're doing what Jesus did in the gospel. God bless you for enabling others to know him more. And the results might not always be apparent to you CCD teachers. But guess what? There are people here today who remember what their catechism teachers taught them 80 years ago, and I didn't make that up. And someday your students will be able to say the same. Where are you getting it, and where are you helping others to get it? And in both cases, what's God saying in that? And the challenge is there for all of us, to be good learners and to be good teachers. God puts that desire in our heart. We can try to ignore it. We can make good use of it. You are making good use of it in all those ways that you do the little things, the conversations, the books, the classes, the TV shows, the radio programs, the magazine articles, all those things that enable you to know him more, just like on the road to Emmaus. So what's working for you in your life these days that you may get to know him more? What's giving you those insights about, wow, I'd never thought that before? And it's not just about the knowledge, it's that you may love, that you may serve. And who's benefiting from your efforts? Let us pray.